Alrighty, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us for our next episode of Live O2 for the People. We're glad you're joining us today, and I am excited to be joined by Julia Hubbel. Julia is an author, an athlete, a veteran, and an adventure traveler. It seems like she does a lot of things, and I'm sure we'll get into all of that later. And we're also joined, as usual, by our VP, Tom Butler. Hi guys, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And let's just start off with some brief intros. So all of you probably by now know Tom. Tom, I'll let you give your 2-second intro, and then let's hear about Julia.
Yeah, Tom Butler here. We are waking people up. It's on a Friday, very much still a work day in the middle of the summer. And this is a good little wake up call that we're putting out there for folks on how to look at your life and change some perspective. So happy to be here with everybody.
Right. And Julia, why don't you give us a little bit? I know I mentioned that you're an author, athlete, veteran, all these things. So why don't you give us a brief introduction before we get into all of the nitty gritty about your life?
Well, Jenna, the overall is I'm a 65-year-old international adventure athlete. I've got 2 prize-winning books out. I've worked for the Fortune 500 for the last, nearly 20 years in supply chain. And I spend a lot of my time, probably about a third of my year, doing pretty epic adventure travel all over the world. And so I'm a serious athlete, even at this age. And my great interests are writing and adventuring and making a difference wherever I can.
Great. Yes, and I'm familiar with your writing. I have peeked around your Medium account a little bit, so I'm aware that you like to write articles regularly, and it seems like they get quite a bit of engagement, so I think that's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and dive into, I guess, what I would like to talk about first is really just how you came across Live O2. You mentioned that you are 65, so thank you for sharing your age. I think that a lot of our audience is very interested in anti-aging, and really what I mean by anti-aging is, not in the cosmetic sense, but in the sense of just being healthier at an older age. So I think it's awesome that you do all of these events and compete at this age. Can you tell us a little bit just about your current, I guess, athletic performance training or competitions, and how Live O2 fits into that? How did you find Live O2? Can you just kind of give us an intro there?
Sure. The long story short is that ever since 2008, when I started riding a pretty aggressive bike and it tossed me on the ground, and that was my first concussion, I have collected some 20 of them over the course of those years, in the course of 10 years. And that's because I kayak, I horseback ride, I climb very large mountains, I do pretty amazing things all over the world, especially for my age. But one of the side challenges of that, especially for equestrians, is head injuries, head traumas. And after I think it was the 16th or 17th one, I was in Iceland and I did a butt over tea kettle tumble down 32 concrete steps, cracked my head wide open, and fractured my pelvis in 2 places, broke my arm and broke my wrist. And that actually was one of the funniest things that ever happened to me, but that was the concussion that set me on the road to find Live O2. Within about 4 months after that concussion, I began to exhibit classic post-concussion syndromes. And anyone who has ever seen the movie Concussion with Will Smith and knows the story about NFL athletes, I was beginning to demonstrate those very symptoms, everything from extreme emotional outbursts to deep depression, constant suicidal thoughts, just a host of classic symptoms that people have when you accumulate too many what's called traumatic brain injuries, or TBI. There are about 54 million people all over in the United States who have them, and rising every year, and a great many of us die from it. Happily, I haven't. But the problem was that it was impeding performance. All of a sudden, being a prize-winning rider, I could not string 2 sentences together. And I was dealing with constant brain fog and the drip, drip, drip of suicidal thoughts. And so September, and this was 2 years ago, in September of that year, my sports chiropractor, Ron Spallone, had just installed a LiveO2 system in his office. Now, Ron is an ex-football player himself. He also has had multiple concussions, and he had researched the fact that he has the gene for Parkinson's. So he's highly motivated to find any kind of protocol that will help him ameliorate those symptoms and prevent Parkinson's. And so he installed a LiveO2 system in his office, and I was the guinea pig. And being an athlete, there was a real benefit to see whether or not the LiveO2 was going to do me any good, and if so, how much good. And so I threw my heart into it. And within about 3 days, and this is the thing that really hooked me on the symptom, on the system. Within 3 days after using the LiveO2 on an exercise bike and doing the adaptive phases, I noticed that, first of all, I got my sense of humor back. Second of all, the brain fog cleared. And third, and probably most importantly, I noticed that my endurance started to increase to the extreme. The other benefit, Jenna, was that, and this was completely unexpected, as somebody who writes regularly, and you mentioned medium.com, I wasn't writing for Medium at the time, but I went from not being able to put a couple of sentences together to punching out 4 to 5 articles every single day. At the time, I was doing it on LinkedIn, and in no time flat, I've got nearly 500 articles on LinkedIn. And it wasn't just the level of productivity, and this is the thing that intrigues me the most. I noticed that the quality of writing, the depth of humor, and all the rest of it had significantly improved. So not only was my basic, the quality of my thinking, the value of how I was able to create work, both benefited. So my endurance has gone up, my capacity for recovery has increased significantly, and I've been using LiveO2 ever since. It's been about 2 years, and so I ended up installing a LiveO2 system in my basement just recently to help me recover from rotary cuff surgery. And so the story is basically, I found it because my sports chiropractor had it, and I leapt on the system, and I stopped using it since.
You know, this is an interesting thing. We talk about concussions, and just the other day, I believe it was on NBC News, where they were, you know, correlating certain behaviors to lack of blood flow to the frontal lobes of the brain. You know, these are things science is trying to learn about for the last 20 years, and in terms of ways to get better blood flow to the brain. And really, I think, Julie, you tapped into it. It's not just the blood flow, it's the oxygenation, and that's such a huge part of this, to, you know, find your result in there. It's neat that you found us, and it's neat that you're in Colorado, so we got to connect in person almost right away.
Well, Tom, if I may, let me support your point, because there are a couple of pieces here. Part of it is that I'm an aging athlete, and the American Lung Association describes the deterioration of our lung capacity as beginning. We peak right around the age of 20 to 25, and about the age of 35, we start losing a percentage of our capacity of our lungs every single year. It's the same as sarcopenia, which is the loss of muscle mass with age. Now, both of those tend to combine as we age, and so if we are sedentary, it exacerbates that condition. So if you're sedentary and you're losing your lung capacity, then that automatically means that your heart and your lungs are not pumping the blood, which is carrying the oxygen and the nutrients to every part of your body, and most especially the brain. And so on top of this, if you exacerbate this by falling down, knocking your head on the bathroom sink, or the cumulative effect of a series of concussions, or even things that happened in our youth, you can see that there's just this perfect storm going on. And so what I've found, and I think a lot of other people have found, and because I'm ex-military and I deal with PTSD as a result of some things that happened in the military in the 70s, if you're dealing with anxiety, and if you're also dealing with a deteriorating body, then you are not giving the brain the quality of oxygen and nutrients that it needs. And the only answer, the only really clear answer that I have found, and it's not so much anti-aging so much as just giving extraordinary quality to the aging I'm experiencing, is making sure that I exercise and that I flood the body and the brain with as much rich oxygen as possible. And it doesn't take me very long every day, just maybe 10 or 15 minutes of adaptive sprints on the LiveO2 system, but I can feel the effects immediately. And I've got more energy than 3 people. You know, I was out this morning running three miles about an hour ago. And that's not lucky. That's hard work, but it is supported in a very major way by the LiveO2, because without the LiveO2, I'd be too depressed to go do it. And that's one of the benefits of the system.
What I find interesting, Julia, is that you are expressing a similar sentiment to one of our previous guests, Jeff Langley, who also, when he started getting more oxygen to his brain, he was just super productive. And he would say the same thing. He would probably like to compete against you, actually, but he would say, you know, I have more energy than everybody. And he never misses a workout. And he cranked out a book, similar to how you said that you were just super productive, you know, writing all of these articles on LinkedIn. So I think it's interesting that both of you have expressed that in just a sense of being productive. So I guess that, Tom, maybe you can speak about the scientific piece behind that. I know that you guys, you know, touched a little bit already on the blood flow and oxygenation, but Tom, can you talk about how the oxygenation supports that blood flow?
Sure. You know, this is exercise, right? Our body has some really good, how about phenomenal pumps? You know, we're not quite sure if our heart is really a pump or more of a vortex, or, you know, pulls blood instead of pushing it. But it's the way we pressurize our system. And that is a key component. You know, when we're exercising, we typically, you know, hear about blood pressure and we think of it in a negative connotation. When you're exercising, blood pressure is great. That's what gets the job done. Now, sure, it's a little bit better to have a little bit lower blood pressure when you're exercising rather than having really high blood pressure. But it's much different than the resting blood pressure that we typically associate it with. So your body's mechanism of pushing into tissue is very important for recovering tissue, getting it blood, and in the case of LiveO2, we're getting it super saturated plasma, and you know, with oxygen, and that in that case, it's really what our body's designed to do. I keep hearing the statistic on, you know, we've got first time I read it, it was 25,000, and then it went up to 50 or 60,000, then it became 75,000 miles of capillary vessels in our bodies. We need that exercise to push into those tissues, and we need those tissues working to create voltage and demand for oxygen and nutrients. It's, you know, it's basically what we want to create day to day. If we're not creating that, you know, it's very simple. If we don't use it, it doesn't stick around. The body is that efficient. It's not going to keep it. And
Tom, let me support you on this. There's a wonderful story in Outside Online right now, which talks about a 97-year-old man who runs Mount Washington every single year. And there are so many examples, and these people are not necessarily outliers. What I think that those of us who are of a certain age, if I can put it that way, those of us who have this extraordinary energy have decided that the body loves to work, and it does. It is designed to be vibrantly healthy. And when we start to say, well, you know, I'm going to retire and I'm going to sit in a rocking chair and watch the world go by, it's time to die. That is exactly what happens. We have told the body, and these trillions of microorganisms that make up this mass that we walk around that give us permission to be here, we've told them that we're ready to slow down and die now. So when we stop moving, we start dying. And that's true at any age. And so what we know is that, for example, I'm recovering from a rotator cuff surgery in my right shoulder. And so that injury heals faster because right before surgery, I was working out and exercising right up to the day I went into the surgical theater. And as soon as I had proper balance, I was back on the bike and getting LiveO2 in my system and pushing. So I'm back at the gym, I'm working out, I'm 6 weeks out. And just yesterday, to give you an example, the physical therapist said, you are way ahead of the curve in terms of your mobility and your ability to use your body. And 2 days ago, I was throwing, I think it was 12 40-pound bags of mulch around the yard. They said, well, we don't want you to lift anything. And I gave her a stink eye, and she laughed. She said, well, you know you're going to do it anyway. And so the piece here, I'm not that far off the norm. I simply ask my body for performance, because if I'm exercising, if I am building muscle mass, and if I am exercising, then to go back to your point, Tom, I am pushing those nutrients everywhere they need to be. And the blood is going to the injury sites, going to the surgical site, and it's healing everything there at warp speed, far faster than the average person says, well, I'm sore, I'm not going to work today. That's the opposite of what the body wants to do. And there's an important line between the exercise pain and genuine injury pain. And that's part of our learning to listen to our body. But where LiveO2 comes into this piece in terms of healing, especially at altitude where we are here in Denver, is that by exercising, by sprinting on the bike, I'm telling my body I want it to heal as quickly as possible within the range of what it can do as it recovers from surgery. And so I'm using LiveO2 as an additional healing process, and it's working.
And I'll jump in here. You know, we typically, for the audience, you look at aging and we have all of these common ideas of what's normal. And right now I'm asking you to collectively throw all that out of the window. And when we talk about listening to the body, that's where you get to decide, you know, what is going to be your normal. Everybody's going to be a little bit different, but really it is about these daily decisions that make up habits. And over time, you are the creator of your health and your body and how it performs. And Julia, you're such a great example of that.
Well, thank you, Tom, and I want to support you on that. And one of the things I want to make clear here is that I used to be obese. I used to be 205 pounds. I have fought that battle, and like a lot of other people, you know, if you've been through it, you understand how wicked hard it is to get up in the morning when you're carrying that extra weight and go out, as I did, and put the cracks in the sidewalk and just get the work done. But the thing that I love about what you just said is that if I choose to change one habit, if I just choose to change one habit, that acts like a domino effect to all of the other habits. Because, for example, if I'm tired and I don't feel like getting on the LiveO2 bike, what I already know is that by the time I've spent 10 to 12 minutes doing those adaptive sprints, I'm going to get off with 1,000% more energy. And then there better not be a postman on the other side of the door because I'm going to go for a run. That's the difference that discipline makes, that habit makes. It makes me feel so much better. And no matter who we are, whether we're recovering from an injury or whether we have to start out on LiveO2 because we are desperately in need of help to start healing ourselves, what I've noticed is that the LiveO2 protocol enhances everything I do at every level. And so, Tom, you made another point about the conventional wisdom about aging. And I want to make a couple of really important points here. About 1 in 4 women over the age of 40, in fact, there are many more than that, but 1 in 4 over 40 is on antidepressants. And there are a number of articles, easy to Google, about over-the-counter medicines which create dizziness, loss of balance, brain fog. And the problem is that so many of us, America gorms 80% of the world's pills. And so in this process of taking a pill for absolutely everything and all those interactions among the pills, we take away our brain power, we confuse ourselves, we get dizzy, and we assume that's a natural part of aging. No, it's not. And here's the argument. October of last year, I took myself off every single pill I was on. And within about a month, I had a whole bunch of mystery symptoms just dissipate because I just took myself off of these toxic meds. And by exercising more, eating in a disciplined manner, and using the LiveO2, because I do have post-concussion syndrome, I am mitigating those symptoms, but I'm maximizing my health. And so the assumptions that we make about aging are absolutely wrong. No, you don't have to get Alzheimer's. No, you don't have to get Parkinson's. No, those things are not a natural part of aging. That is a lie. It's become the norm because we take so many pills, because when we choose to be sedentary, we tell the body it's time to die. And so by simply changing a series of habits, giving our brains the oxygen it needs, and working our bodies, and it can only be a walk, it could be something simple. Starting the habit, if it's no more than walking around the block, if that's a big deal, then that's to be celebrated. And what's amazing about walking around the block is that the body says, you know something, I'd like more than this. And within a couple of months, you find yourself either walking a whole lot farther or now you're running. It's the invitation to the body to play, because that's how we're designed. And for my part, what LiveO2 allows me to do is play at a very high level. I climb mountains, I cycle, I bungee jump, I paraglide, I skydive, I do all these different sports. And of course, in doing them, I injure. And so the price that I pay is the occasional epic injury. And so for me, part of the essential protocol is LiveO2 to not only make sure my brain is protected, but that I heal quickly so I can go out and get back on the horse that threw me.
Mm-hmm.
Is it appropriate that I just wanted to give you a huge amen there? I think so many things you're saying are so true, and you're right. It has just kind of become a societal acceptance that we have to do these certain things because we're a certain age. So thank you for saying those statements, and I hope that people really listen to that. And what I wanted to ask you, Julia, and maybe this is the point you were making about just getting out the door, but you're obviously an extreme athlete. Well, I wouldn't say extreme athlete, but you are very active at, an age that most people aren't. And secondly, you are ex-military. So I feel like you've already adhered to a discipline that many regular people haven't. So what I wanted to ask you is, you have the built-in discipline. For those people that don't quite yet have it, how would you recommend those people who want to start this anti-aging mindset to take their first step? And maybe that's what you were saying with just getting out the door and walking, but do you have any different thoughts about how people who may not have a strong discipline could really just get their first foot forward in that?
I wrote an article this morning, Jenna, that spoke immediately to that. Again, there's a wonderful article on Outside Online about motivation. Motivation does not begin in the brain. It does not begin in the brain. It begins with action. And this is a really important point. There are mornings I wake up and I don't want to go run. I don't want to hike. I don't want to run out here at Red Rocks. I don't want to do it. And so I can lie there and think, I gotta. And an hour later, I'm still lying there thinking. What happens is that the motivation follows an action. When you get up and do, you get up and do, and it's the statement to the body, okay, we're moving now. And it is remarkable how the elements align behind the physical action of getting up. And if all I can do is go downstairs and sit on a bike and cycle slowly for 10 minutes, then that's doing. And the body says, okay, it's time to go do something now. And it's like, if you've ever watched a mother duck take off for a stream, and the baby ducks are looking around going, well, I guess if we're going to eat, we better go follow mom. It works exactly the same way. Action starts the motivation because of how we feel after we get going. And I'll give you an example. This morning, I didn't feel like running more than 1.5 miles. And by the time I had run 1.5 miles, I said, you know something, it's time for me to double the distance today. And I just decided to bypass my home street and do the entire 3 miles. And the interesting thing about that is that, you know, by the time you get home, you just feel so righteous. And the whole body says, oh my God, let's align with the action. The decision means nothing. It's the action that starts it. And when we trust that, everything in the universe aligns behind the movement to get up and walk across the room, open the door and walk out on the street and start walking. And everything around you says, okay, we're on the move now. Let's go make this fun. It changes everything when we stop relying on the decision. And Jenna and Tom, think about what happens every January. I'm in the gym. I'm a dedicated bodybuilder, 45 years in the gym. And I can tell you every January what happens to how long I have to wait for the chest press. And by then, everybody's gone because they've made a mental decision. And yet by the time March comes around, their bodies, they no longer make themselves get up and work. And when the body doesn't get up and go do it, mentally, you're not there anymore. And that's why people drop off. And so it's the physical action that gets us going. It is not easy. I would never tell anybody it's easy. Mm-hmm. It took me a year to drop 80 pounds, and that was 30 years ago. And that was not easy, nor am I lucky. Luck has nothing to do with it. It is hard work, particularly as we get older. It becomes harder because that influence of conventional wisdom, people say, well, running's bad for your joints. No, it's not. Well, that you're going to hurt yourself if you go out there. Maybe I will. But that if you allow that to talk you into sitting in your chair with your bag, with your hand in a bag of greasy Doritos, watching reruns on Ion TV, then you're starting to die. That's a decision. The body will move if you get up and ask it to. It is incredible what the body can do at any age. And to that example, Jenna, I can think of two women. One is a Hispanic gal down in the South Florida who's 71, and another is in her 80s. And both of these women are professional bodybuilders, and they are in the Guinness Book of World Records, and neither one of them ever picked up a weight before the age of 60. Wow. Age has nothing to do with it. We can do so many things if we say, you know something? I'm moving. You get up and move, and the body says, fine, we're on our way. You're already motivated because you're on the move. That's the advice I'd give.
As this is happening, I'm exploring my beliefs. And that's what's so great about it is you're sitting here thinking, you know, where am I on this, you know? And what we try to set individuals up for is to catch them early enough, you know, and I'm a perfect example. I'm in my 40s. And I want to plan, you know, to live 10 decades. I want to get to level, you know, 99. And if you start early, you have a little bit more momentum. It absolutely doesn't matter where you start or when you start. It's just the fact of, okay, I'm going to start and I'm making the decision. So I go back to you decide. And then Julia is just the most perfect catalyst of saying, get into action, you know, Goya, get off your anatomy. And this is where it happens. And I'm going to shamelessly plug Julia's book because I don't think a lot of listeners realize, Julia, you really are an expert. And if I encourage people to pick up Julia's book, Wordfood, I'm encouraged to anybody that wants her book to call us and let's start this conversation and figure out a way to get them a book. If you just get to chapter 2, you know, basically you're going from exploring your own vocabulary that you provide yourself, and you're going from something like, I'm such an idiot, to good morning, gorgeous. And that is, you know, that's the premise of where everybody needs to be, just to provide the world with the gift of being yourself and getting yourself motivated and elevating it. And I mean, really, we are, on a planet that has a lot of crazy things going on. And if you want to save the planet, you got to go look in the mirror. And, it's got to be you, and it's got to be today. It's going to be hard work. But once you get over that realization of it being hard work, you get to go play. And I think Julia just does such an awesome job of bringing that message out in her book.
Well, thank you, Tom. And let me circle back around to something that you just said a second ago that is really, really powerful. I'm going to reword it. We owe the world our gifts. And as we age, one of the things that happens in a youth-obsessed society is that right about the time we hit 60, which for me is the year that I climbed and summited Mount Kilimanjaro, people are put out to pasture. You're expected to shut up and be grandma and granddad and not get in the way. And we worship pre-adolescence because we are terrified of dying. And so the assumption is by the time I hit 60, I got nothing to offer. And I beg to differ. And the reason I say that is assuming, and this is the key piece, if I have taken care of my body and I am mindful of taking care of my brain, then I have got perspectives, I have got wisdom, I have got road rash that I earned. I have paid the price for what I see, how I feel, and how I perceive the world. And at that point, when we enter our last 3 to 4 decades, we have so much more to offer. And in this country, it's at the same time, people expect us to go away, sit on a rocking chair, and go fishing for the rest of our lives, right at the time we most need that wisdom, that insight, that perspective that says, something, I'll give you a classic example. I write a lot on a thread called Outdoor Women Alliance. And almost everybody it's all over the country, there are probably about 6,000 or 7,000 members now, and almost everybody on there is in their 20s and 30s. And these are badass, radical female athletes, all people-powered stuff. It's SUP and hiking and kayaking and all the rest, all the stuff that I do. And I'm the oldest one on there. And so back earlier this year, there was a woman who had a very bad MCL break, and she was wailing and moaning that her life was over. Oh, woe is me. I had a terrible breakup. It's time to die. And she's like, he is maybe a third my age. And so part of me was laughing because at this point, I've been through quite a few of those. And you realize that it ain't no big thing. Injuries you get over. Boyfriends you get over, they get replaced. And the ability to go online and say, hey, have you thought of this? Hey, have you thought of that? Try this, try that. And you engender this big, lively discussion among a whole bunch of other people who have had that experience. And age and experience and road rash give you the ability to give that gift to others. And we owe that to people, Tom. This goes back to your point. We owe the world our gifts. Many of us do not even begin to come into our own until we are in our 6th decade, because whatever has been latent in us, be it we've been moms or grandmoms or whatever it is, suddenly the husband leaves home or whatever it is, all of a sudden you realize you've got all this time, you've got all this ability, and all this potential that has always been there. Now, what is it going to take for us to play with that and develop it and use it in a different set of decades? There is no reason why somebody in their 50s and 60s, 70s, and 80s can't dip a spoon into the same potential that I have. They have different gifts. They have different things to offer. But by keeping ourselves healthy and energetic and positive because we feel good, we can give the world our gifts. And that probably is the single most important thing. Rather than be weighed down by our years, we are buoyed up by all the wisdom that we have gained by being around. And when we take care of ourselves, give our brains the oxygen it needs, give all our cells the nutrients and the oxygen that exercise, and for me, LiveO2 helps me deliver, then we become unstoppable the older we get. There's no reason all of us can't do that.
That's amazing, Julia. I mean, again, you've made me feel like I'm in one of these Southern churches. I just want to be giving you a hand raise and an amen after everything you say. And I say that because I've just returned from spending a week at home. Both of my parents are in their mid-60s. And I'm sure they won't be listening to this, so they probably won't get offended, but they very much adhere to the societal norms, and both of them are very inactive right now. And it frustrates me because I don't believe that they should be. At the same time, they have a lot going on. So I understand that just getting started is very difficult, but I 100% agree with you. It's the action that makes the difference, and they have so much to offer. So I just want to thank you for sharing that, because I really do believe that is true. And hopefully you will inspire a lot of our listeners to take that first step, and maybe my parents included. We'll see if I can get them to listen to this. Great. Well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Tom, I'm not sure if you have anything else to add before we close out.
Well, yeah, Julia, I want to express to anybody listening to this, if you call us up and talk to anybody on the phone and start talking about Wordfood, we will make sure to get a book. I'm going to figure out a way to get a book to everybody in the company. It's impacted me personally, and it's such a simple thing, and we are all constantly engaged in it and engaged with others. So it's an awesome skill to know. And Julia, you're just the pillar of of Wordfood for us. So thank you for sharing all of this. I think we do want to do that closing question, Jenna, because
Yep.
that I think is our new little pattern.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we close out, first, I just want to make sure that our listeners know I'm going to link up to everything Julia here in the blog post, so you guys can find her book. You can find her Medium account. Julia, are you still publishing on LinkedIn, or is it mainly Medium right now?
Oh, I primarily write for Medium, and then I often copy many of the same articles over on LinkedIn.
Gotcha. Okay. So we'll make sure and link up to all of that stuff so you guys can find some of Julia's writings, and it's very encouraging. And I would really recommend you guys to check out one or two of her posts just to get a taste. So Julia,
I could throw in here one piece.
Yeah,
If
absolutely.
people would like a really good book, if they're interested in reforming good habits, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, Duhigg, is an extremely good book to help people look at what they do and why they do it, and if they want to learn how to change those habits. That was a great book for me to read too.
Great. For sure. I will link up to that as well. And it's probably one I would like to check out for myself. So thanks for that. I'll put that in the links. Okay, Julia. So to close out, what Tom came up with this, and we're going to make this part of our regular closing out on podcast. So you're a guinea pig for this, but we would like you to share what your prescription is for health. And that could be anything you want. I mean, obviously, we're not talking about true prescription, but in the sense of medication. But what would you say to someone who just wants to be healthy? What would your recommendations be?
Number one is the typical diet and exercise, which we all know. Probably, and even more importantly than that, Jenna, have a support system, a social support system. Study after study after study has indicated that people who live long have strong social support systems. And I'm talking about positive people, not folks that have a pity party with you, but positive people who uplift you, challenge you, and encourage you. So number one, social system. Number two, making sure you're taking care of yourself through diet and exercise, and in every way possible, get off the meds. If you possibly can, research, understand long-term side effects, and if you possibly can, clean your body of what are all too often toxic medications. The third piece is have a purpose. We all, as Tom said a few minutes ago, we all have gifts to give. Some of us don't find them until very late in life, and you haven't lost a thing if that is the case. It means that this is what it took for you to get to the point where you're ready to give the world your gifts. So if we have that social support system that's positive, we take care of our body through diet and exercise, make sure our bodies are getting the exercise we need. And third, have that purpose. That purpose is unique to each of us. And when we have those three things, it is a real prescription for a vibrant, happy, joyful life. That's what I would say.
And on the first point, Julia, about the social experience or social support group, for folks who are aging, how would you recommend if they don't have a strong support group or don't have, you know, a strong group of friends. Obviously, I think that in your situation, you compete a lot. You probably meet lots of people going out to practice or going to different events and competitions. And how would you recommend for someone who is, let's say, in this aging population to find a strong support group?
Okay, first of all, the suggestion would be, where is my wisdom useful? And to the point in my Wordfood book, if I sit around and say, well, nobody is interested in me, nobody cares about me, I don't have anything good to say. Okay, you're right. Or I can say, you know something, I've been doing this for a long time and I've got something to offer. I'm going to go spend time with a dog shelter because I love dogs, or I'm going to go out and start horseback riding again. You know, almost all my friends in their 60s have come back to horseback riding. Whatever I say to myself, I will work hard to be right. And so there's a mental conversation going on. If I say I'm a fat, ugly pig, you know something, I'm right. Or if I say, you know something, you're gorgeous and I'm proud of you for going out running this morning, you know something, I'm right. And so if I am sitting around feeling lonely and unhappy and I'm bitter and angry, I'm not exactly going to be a magnet for friends. However, if I go back to what I said earlier about taking action, if I look around the city or the town where I am and I say, who out there can use help? And trust me, lots of people can use help. And I show up and I start getting active and I start noticing how grateful people are and what they have to say to me about how kind I am or how much of a difference I made. I'm sorry, that's food, and we feed on that. We need that. And when we find ourselves making a difference, being useful, being important to people, whether it's taking a therapy dog around to hospice, it makes no difference whatsoever. When you put yourself in the river of life, you create life. You create more life, and you expand that good exponentially. If you stay home and whine about how lonely you are, you get to bathe in your pity party. It really is a black and white choice. And I'm not going to say it's easy. It takes some experiment. It takes building a habit. It takes some research. But the web is full of data that I can look at and say, what interests me? If I say nothing interests me, I'll go back to what I said. You're right. And you can be right, you can be dead right, or you can be right about how somebody needs you out there. And that is a guarantee. And they're waiting for you to show up and make a difference in their lives. They are hungry for what you have to offer. When we understand that our real role in this world is to be useful to others and use the road rash that we've been through to make friends and provide advice, then we will be welcomed. And I find that being active with much younger people, women who are athletes and who deal with some of the same stuff that I dealt with 30, 40, 50 years ago, they find that really valuable. I just stumbled on it because I was looking. And so if I'm willing, again, get out the door, stumble around, and you will find that, you know, that gold pot at the end of the rainbow, it's waiting for us.
Tom, did you have something to add there?
I have nothing else to say.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you were about to say something.
I'm just humming in appreciation over here.
Yeah, me too. I mean, so I guess before we close out, Julia, do you have a podcast?
Well, no, I don't. I'm primarily a writer. I do professional speaking and I do inspirational speaking. And most of what interests me right now, Jenna, is how do we inspire people to look at what's possible rather than feeling like a victim. And and I'll share something. I was attacked in the military. I had PTSD for a very long time. And I did a speech not long ago to a group of some 300 women veterans. And I said, you got a choice. And you can let that drag you down the rest of your life. And you've given that person or that situation permission to rob you of your entire life. Or you can let that put steel in your backbone and say, without this, I have no compassion. Without these experiences, I have no empathy. And to me, Jenna and Tom, that is a black and white decision. I choose to be a victim, or I choose to let that form me into somebody that's useful to everybody else. And that's a very powerful choice because the world is hungry for people who have something to offer, and we all do. And when we talk ourselves out of it, we rob the world of what we have to offer. And again, Tom, I just want to acknowledge your point about gifts, because we are all gifted. Every single one of us is gifted. You know, and even people who are disabled who are gifted. You've got a person who is going up the side of Mount Kilimanjaro on 4 stumps, and the rest of us are sitting around with 2 legs and 2 arms, and all of our faculty saying, "Oh, woe is me." And you know, yeah, I'm with the guy with 4 stumps when he's on the top of Kilimanjaro. That's courage, and we all have that as a potential. We just need to tap into it, and that takes action on our part.
Well, Julia, I wish you did have a podcast, because I feel inspired just after this 45 minutes with you. And Tom and I usually record these toward the end of the week, so either on Thursday or Friday. So it always makes me go into my weekend on a positive note. So thank you for that. I know our listeners will be hearing it probably midweek, but you've really left me with a lot of inspiration today, and really to establish some goals for myself. Being in my early 30s, I'd love to be where you are, hopefully, when I reach that age. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
And Tom, thanks again for joining us on this podcast recording for this week. And is there anything you'd like to add before we close out?
I feel like this all just became very real. And thank you for being so genuine. All of our listeners, and Julia and Jenna. And yeah, it is it is a chance to make some decisions and go after them. Go get them.
Great. Well, thanks, Julia, again for your time. For our listeners, I will link up to everything mentioned. And as Tom said, if you'd guys like to get your hands on Wordfood, we will make that happen. So you can find information about that in the blog post. And great. Thanks, guys, for this recording. I hope you find it useful, and we will see you next time.
Thanks very much.